Hey family, welcome to How Love Works, where we talk about the principles for lasting love. Well family, I was listening to one of my favorite all-time songs, I guess. I'm gonna date myself. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Percy Sledge. I'm not really that old, but I'm old enough to like that song. And it's a great song. He talks about, and I think it was his only number one hit. And the name of the song is "When a Man Loves a Woman." And it's a great line, when a man loves a woman. But it kind of reminds me of some things that I used to do when my girls were younger, and it made me think about this subject matter. I said, that'd be something I'd be interested in maybe revisiting. That's something that I used to do quite often as my girls were growing up. As you guys already know, I have two daughters, and both of them are young ladies now, both out of the house. And one thing I used to do quite a bit as a father, I would always try to give them a little bit of information about how the male mind works. And so I thought that might be something I want to talk about today, because I know there are a lot of young ladies out there, especially some of the ones that are listening now, or any woman under the age of 35 could easily be my daughter. And so I I thought it'd be interesting to give a little insight about that issue about, how do you know, how can you determine, and what are some of the ways you know when a man loves a woman? Well, I think what I used to always do with my daughters, and I used to always say this a lot, that you have to recognize the world you live in. A lot of the behavior that women experience from men, it just didn't happen in a vacuum. It just didn't, guys didn't just wake up one day and just decide that, 75, 80% of male population were just going to be guys who were just going to be focusing entirely on sexual conquest. That's not really the way it really works. And so I used to always try to help my daughters to understand and get a big picture of the world, and don't be so focused upon what you want out of a relationship. I mean, obviously that's important. I used to always make sure that they were very clear about what was most important in a relationship. And so that's one of my first points. Get a big picture of what are the types of men that we're seeing in our environment today. And you will most likely notice that there are quite a few who have drank the Kool-Aid, and they have bought into popular culture, and obviously there are a lot of men who have some issues with obligation and relationships, and a lot of men don't see the value in long-term permanent relationships. That's a cultural thing. That's a new paradigm. That's not life. That's not reality. The reason I am very confident in making that statement is because, of course, I don't believe biblically or any other way. I see it's bore out in the statistics as well. It's just not good for men to be by themselves. Men don't do well by themselves. They self-destruct. They even do it when they're trying to have multiple relationships. They self-destruct. It's just not the way we're designed, irrespective of what scientists or social scientists are always trying to tell us about how male behavior typically is, where we're just out there, like, in a sense, animals trying to have multiple relationships with women. I personally believe a lot of that has to do with the construct of the culture. And I also believe that just based upon the way we are in terms of our nature, if you have a culture that constantly fans say the more primitive side of our nature, then that's what you're going to get. Whatever you pay for or compensate, that's what you get. And so that's one of the areas I would always tell my daughters, you know, you, in order to first of all find out what does it take, or what are the clues that you will notice in a man who actually has a heart for you, you have to first of all understand the environment that these men are coming out of, because that'll help you to sort, and you won't be so quick to fall into relationships with these guys. Because like a normal father, I understand how the male mind works. I understand that a lot of men, because they have been brought up this way, and of course it's biological as well, men have a particular, I can say, awe, or even I will go so far as say fascination and healthy respect for feminine sexuality. And they admire it so much. Now I know you're dealing with a lot of young men who don't know how to express that thought, but this is what I mean by that. Men respect a woman's sexuality so much so that they hold it in high esteem. Now they want it constantly. They're constantly seeking it. But the first time a woman decides that she's going to give that I would say the most precious thing outside of her love to a man who has not proven himself worthy, then that man automatically assumes that she is not worthy. She has no values, no standards. Now, obviously, I know there's a conflict of understanding. Men and women don't think the same way. We don't even love the same way. We don't express love the same way. That's why I did what I did with my daughters. I wanted them to see the big picture when it came to what kind of world these men were coming out of, so they would have some understanding of what kind of man they would be dealing with. And then I wanted them to understand that what they had, their physicality, their sexuality, their love, all of that was very, very special. And men, good men, they really admired that about women. And so when a woman gave that away so quickly and gave it away without even a thought, then most men would not have much respect for a woman like that. And so that's one of the areas I really focused a lot of attention upon when it came to my daughters. Another area that I wanted them to understand is, how would they be able to know when a man was interested in and he wanted more than just the physical side of a relationship? When he wanted permanence, if you will, and he started focusing in that direction. What are some of the simple ways that my daughters would be able to understand a man's heart? And what I wanted my girls to understand is, I wanted them to understand the difference between responsibility and control. Let me say that again. Responsibility and control. See, when a man starts to fall in love with a woman, he doesn't try to control her. See, women today, they get in relationships with men and they start trying to control the woman, control her time, trying to control her money, trying to control her body, try to control her language, try to control her friends, try to control her life. And then he'll say a simple phrase like, that's because I love you. That's how he ends this control fest that he's involved in. But if the woman, and sadly, I'm sad to say, a lot of young ladies didn't have the benefit of a father to give them this information. A lot of women don't understand, when you find a man who is trying to control your life in every area of your life. And then he says, I'm doing this because I love you. He's lying to you. He's defrauding you. He's stealing from you. He's insulting your intelligence. See, I told my daughters, and I've showed it based upon our personal relationship between myself and how I love them and how I express my love to them, and more so how I express my love to their mother. Now, when I say this, it'll make perfect sense to you. Now, my daughter saw my love. I showed my love because I made myself more, I gave myself the obligation, if you will. I don't like the term obligation. I put it this way. I made myself responsible. That's what I did. I gave myself the right to be responsible for their lives, for their protection. I made myself responsible to provide for them. I made myself responsible. I took more responsibility in the relationship, in other words. And that's one of the signs that is a big glaring that's a big glaring sign for a woman. And that's what I told my daughters. I said, look, the easiest way for you to know if a man really, really, really has an eye on a permanent future, a partnership that's going to last forever, he starts to take greater and greater responsibility for you and the relationship. Now, that's a far cry from control. It's because responsibility is not about trying to intimidate or manipulate you. This is free will. A man's doing this because he wants to do it. Now, he's going to express that responsibility according to his own history, according to his lifestyle, according to his goals, according to the woman in front of him, according to his belief system, his worldview. But at the end of the day, that's one of the clearest signs that you'll see that that man is falling in love with you because he's taking greater and greater responsibility for the relationship and in the relationship. He's doing it willingly. When you see men run from the responsibilities of a relationship, and trust and believe, every relationship, I don't care what kind of relationship, what context, what the narrative is, every relationship there is responsibility in a relationship. And when there's only a one-size situation where either you or the man, it doesn't matter who it is, which one of the parties it is, whoever is taking the responsibility of the relationship and he or she is just doing it by themselves, they're in it by themselves, and the other person's just along for the ride, that person can say whatever they want to say. There is no love going on in that relationship. None. Because love takes responsibility. And that's what I taught my girls. You see. Now, it's no different if you're dealing with an adult male in his 30s. Or, But one thing I also taught my daughters, I will say this, is what men typically do when we meet a woman and we listen to, what it is in life they're looking for in a man and in a relationship. Men don't ask those questions arbitrarily unless they're players. And we ask those questions because we want to determine whether or not her answers are going to fit our lives. Because the last thing we want to do is to try to take a woman, in a sense, we don't want to take a square peg and put it in a round circle. We don't want to try to manipulate anything. We don't want to do that. Because one thing you will realize about most men, most women know this, men hate to be manipulated as well as women, obviously. Men hate to be in a relationship where a woman finds him to be inadequate. Because anytime a woman is trying by intent and doing it deliberately to change a man, the mindset or the message that all men receive is that I'm inadequate, I am not enough. And one area that I try to help my daughters to understand in terms of the male psyche is this. Why is it that a man can get into a relationship with a young, at a young age with his friends, and he can stay friends with that guy forever, almost 30, 40, 50 years? One of the biggest reasons, the biggest draw that women just don't understand this, is that men, we just accept each other, flaws and all. And we don't go out of our way necessarily to look at an issue and then try to change that person. We don't do those kinds of things. What a man will do is, all men have friends who have issues, who have foibles, who have areas that they can work on. All men have these situations. But the difference is, a man is not going to criticize his friend as a way of trying to change him. We don't do that. What men will do is, if a man, normally what will happen, a man will be in a situation where he finds himself on that merry-go-round of consequence over and over. He's feeling the consequence of a bad choice, of bad habits, bad relationships. And what typically happens, a man will go to his friend. And when he comes to his friend, that's when his friend will just say, look, what's going on? Have you learned anything? What is it that needs to be changed in this situation? Why are you doing the same things over and over again and getting the same result and expecting a different result? We're not necessarily trying to point blame, because we know that's an issue of intent. We're not trying to do that. We're looking at him and say, look, one of the reasons that this situation continues is that somebody's not taking responsibility. And we let it go. That's just part of the flavor. That's just the way the relationship flow. I'm not going to try to make the man do anything. He's got to make that decision on his own. That's called faith. And see, women don't do that often, and that's one of the things that I've always taught my daughters. You have the right to make statements to a man about things that he brings to you. You have that right. If he opens up Pandora's box, tell him what you think. You can tell a man what you think without pointing blame. You just talk about the circumstances as though they're just general circumstances, and just say, hey, how do you see this thing? That adds value, because you can say what needs to be said without being toxic, without being self-righteous. And that's one of the things I taught my daughters in terms of how to deal with those types of circumstances when it comes to men. And when you do those things, it's amazing how a man, all of a sudden, he will project this woman into his life. And now all of a sudden he can see himself with this kind of woman. This is the kind of woman that I dreamed about. This is the kind of woman that is very attractive because they're so very rare. So I also taught my daughters that one of the biggest traits that I've always wanted them to be very open to is a man who is willing to laugh at himself. A man who is willing, who is selfless. A man who has empathy. I even like it. I even told my daughters this. Look, if you ever run into a man and he is just as smooth as butter, and he just talks, he can talk your clothes off, that man don't care nothing about you. But if you're dealing with a man, he can barely get his words together, he has a little difficult time talking. That man has a very high, he thinks very highly of you. And if you can find a way to help him define his voice without having him lose face, that in itself will endear him to you. And so these are some of the traits, some of the things that I used to talk to my daughters about. And so I just wanted to, for some of the younger ladies out there, these are the ways and these are some of the signs that you can look for or should be looking for, because these are the ways a man loves a woman. And those are the kinds of men who will remain in a relationship. Because if you see, I got this last thing I better say real quick before I end this. One area that I noticed that I used to always tell my daughters was that you always want to look for guys who have good friends. That they've been in relationships for a long time. I'm not talking about toxic friends, drug dealers, thug boys, always in and out of trouble, breaking the law. I'm talking about guys with, these guys add value to his life. And he's been in good standing, had a good relationship with these guys his entire life. And 9 times out of 10, especially if you got a single guy and his best friend is married, that's almost a guarantee he getting married. That's almost a guarantee. Now, if you got a guy who has a healthy respect for his best friend and his best friend is married, I'm going to tell you right now, the way a man's mind works, he going to go down that road. And he's more apt to want to connect. You see? So those are just some of just the simple stuff. I mean, there's a lot more obviously I can do and say about this issue, and I don't want to belabor it any longer than I have. So I just wanted to say, when a man loves a woman, he's going to take more responsibility for the relationship. When a man loves a woman, he's going to have empathy. When a man loves a woman, he's definitely going to have lasting, long relationships with people who have added value to his life. When a man loves a woman, he cares about her life, and he's always thinking about and he's always doing what is in her best interest. When a man loves a woman, he doesn't take control. He shows her the utmost of respect. That's my time. I thank you for yours. God bless you. See you on the other side.